Alright, let's go through the process of adjusting our skeleton. First thing I'm going to do is just make sure I save this out and make it ready for everything that we're doing here. And what we want to start with is the skeleton. So we're going to come all the way up, turn the skeleton on, and what you might want to do is just duplicate this so that you've got an alternate. And in my case, I'm going to rename it as well, if I can find the rename. And I'm just going to say the old one is the female skeleton, so I'll have it for reference. And then we'll have this guy here. So solo mode on, and let's review the differences. Okay, as well as the stereotypes and all of that stuff. So, just a quick review. Male and female, we are talking about two different shapes. So male is going to be this upside down triangle, and then female will be a triangle in the other direction. Alright, now the key elements to the male were bulkier deltoids. Okay, and the bulk being pushed off to the side, basically, because remember the deltoid doesn't move into the rib cage at all. The deltoid overlays the humerus on the outside, so no matter what happens, the volume always pushes outwards. Okay, and then in a female, the female's particular triangular shape is brought about by the increase in mass in the fat pads, as well as, and this is the primary difference, as well as the width of the hip. And that's going to be essentially the only thing that we change in this particular part of the lecture. Now we're going to leave everything alone because we may have made some mistakes earlier on, and we may have the clavicle too short for a male, and we might have things built in, so we're going to go through and solve everything step by step. The first pure scientific difference that we have is the pelvic bone. And now remember that adage, the forensic scientist can tell the difference, or can distinguish the gender of a skeleton from the face only a little bit of the time, with very little accuracy. But when they have the pelvic bone and the skull, their accuracy, if my numbers are correct, they might not be, but if my numbers are correct, their accuracy goes upwards to 80% accuracy. Just by the addition of the pelvic bone, because obviously the pelvic bone is the primary skeletal difference between men and women. And why would that be? Okay, quick, try to see what you can think of. Why would the pelvic bone be the primary difference between male and female? So remember, skeleton evolution, all of these guys go into function. Remember Louis Sullivan's decree, form follows function, the architect from early 1900s. Form following function, evolution based on function. The one thing that is so much a part of us as creatures is birthing. The female does something totally different in her hips than we as men do. And so their hip structure is very, very different. I shouldn't say very different. I mean, we're talking minor degrees, but it's enough. So let's zoom in on the pelvic bone, and let's just recap on the primary differences. So in terms of the shape characteristics, okay, one thing we talked about early on was that the female pelvic area, pelvic bone, is going to be a little bit wider than it is tall. Okay, and that's because the primary thing the female pelvic has to do in terms of our evolutionary makeup is basically it's got to allow a baby to pass through there. So it's wider in this area. the area here is known as the pelvic ring, and that's going to be, basically where the two wings of the ilium are going to connect in with the sacrum and then pull together down here for the pubic symphysis. Now, in terms of the overall dimensions here, let's get a measurement from one anterior superior iliac crest to the other. Now, we talked a little bit about this when we were making it, but let's get in and see, what our measurement is after all the resculpting that we might have done. I'm going to grab move, pull it in, and about 1 to 1.5. Remember, you can see that measurement unit up in the top corner. So 1.15 is what we ended up doing for her. And then now if we pull this back a bit, I'm going to pull this back to 1. Yeah, all the way to 1. I'm looking up here at the top. I'm going to turn symmetry off so I get rid of both of those guys and just line up this center dot to try to find out where the male anterior superior iliac spine is going to be. So that's a pretty good indicator. So in the female, our anterior superior iliac spine is positioned about right there. And now in a male, we end up moving that just slightly upwards, and then we're going to put it right at one head. So let's be clear about what the differences are. We already spoke and said width is the difference, okay? And that width is something that we can make sure that we establish. By setting the distance between the anterior superior iliac spines. We can then extrapolate down or back from that. And if we look at the angle of the female, let's just put this in red. Okay, the angle of the female here. Even that angle starts to change. So let's put the male in green so that we get a kind of obvious difference. The angle all the way down to the ischial spines, that's all going to change as well. But not too terribly much. We're really going to just kind of bring in the width. Where that angle really starts to change is actually up here in the ilium. So in the female, the line continues for a while and then breaks inwards. In the male, that's going to be less so. It's going to break a lot quicker. So we're not going to get too much movement before this starts to move inwards and establish more of the ilium up here. And then also we're going to get more width out of that. The placement of that sacrum is not really going to change, although the width would change. The primary thing is that we are just adjusting this angle by curving in more up towards the top. We're going to be trimming the fat, or trimming a little bit of distance here. And we're going to be increasing the size of those ischial spines a little bit because of the muscle attachments. They're going to be larger, they're going to be pulling on that more, and so it's going to be more of a developed ischium right there, a little bit more of a developed muscular attachment. Okay, also the pelvic ring is obviously not going to be anywhere near as robust. So we're going to start to cave in from there as well. And in terms of my sculpt, I'm going to actually pull the sacrum inwards a little bit. Okay, get some more height. So the green is going to be what we're going for. That's going to be the primary thing that we're going for. The red is what we had before. So take a moment, be really clear about this. The primary thing that's changing is the width. So the width is going to get less, and we're going to start to change direction along the top. And we're going to also be pulling in from the inside, so that pelvic ring gets a lot smaller and kind of accommodates for that loss of volume on the side.